Welcome to the Business Intercept, everybody. Thanks for joining for another episode. We're going to talk about a very serious subject today, a real interesting business topic that unfortunately is a kind of a lesson to American business owners, particularly those who are moderate size to large when dealing with a foreign country. So we're going to get into this story. Like I said, it's unfortunate, but it's going to be a lesson for anyone that wants to do business overseas. Again, this is the Business Intercept, where we try to bring you interesting business stories that are in the news, some that you may have heard about, and others that you might not have, because I have the time to do so and you don't. So I'm trying to give you some insight into what is going on, as opposed to just looking at the regular political YouTube videos or movie reviews when there aren't any movies right now and things of that nature. If you like what you hear, please make comments below, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so that you can find out when new content is being added. So let's get into this. From the very beginning of Donald Trump's presidency, he had two things that he talked about most. The first, of course, was illegal immigration. We're not going to talk about that today. The second was America being taken advantage of, by foreign governments, specifically China. He has been on a rant against China ever since he first mentioned the idea of being president way back in the late 80s in an interview with Oprah when she was just beginning her show. He's been pretty consistent about his feelings about China. And say what you want about Donald Trump, his brashness, his lack of campaign discipline, rudeness, whatever you want to say about him. He has been consistently correct about China. And people have been talking about the problem with China for a while. And it's pretty simple. China is the largest country in the world by population, right? I think they've got 3-4 billion people. I can't even remember. It's a heck of a lot more people than America, put it that way. And as a result of their large size, large business looks to China as the next great marketplace for their goods and services, because it's relatively an untapped market. And as the Chinese Communist government has kind of somewhat on the surface loosened the communistic ties, if you will, to allow some hybrid of business and capitalism, not capitalism in the way that we in America or people in Europe would think of it, but certainly guided by the Communist Party, but at least open where people begin building some sort of a life, and certainly large businesses, which are often controlled in some form or fashion by the Chinese government itself. The middle class in China has began to grow. They've got money now. And as they expand out further into different parts of China to make that middle class even larger and make their economy even larger, they're doing a lot of things to try and fuel that. But the problem, of course, is China is what China is, a communist country that its biggest worry, its biggest concern is the Chinese Communist government. Not business, not its economy, what they deem is best for the country as a whole. And for them, what is often deemed best, frankly, is getting new technologies, new intellectual property, new knowledge that they don't generate themselves, but comes to them through investment in their country from American companies, Australian companies, European countries, just about anybody that wants access to their market. China is willing to give you access to the market for a price. And very often, that price is the theft of your intellectual property. Which brings us to this story here, unfortunately, from Fox Business, in which China has taken advantage of what's happening with coronavirus to make some moves. I mean, look, many years ago, somebody on the Democratic Party, I think it was Rahm Emanuel, said, never let a crisis go to waste. It's become an infamous line here in America because, of course, the context is when there's a crisis, you can take advantage of it to push your agenda further down the road, often with things that have nothing to do with fixing whatever particular crisis that you're facing. Well, China has taken this type of thought process to heart, and they're making big moves right now because they know America and Europe are concerned with the coronavirus. Okay, now conspiracy people might say that that was always intended. Maybe not. All I know is they're making military moves and they're making business moves. And in this story here, it says China wields coronavirus to nationalize an American-owned car maker. And look, we're going to go through the details of this story, but let me say up front, this isn't the first time this has happened to an American company. Okay? It's happened to American energy companies, for instance, in South America, in which they've been in certain countries. Those countries have gone either socialist or Marxist and just took over the oil fields or what have you and nationalized it. It's one of the dangers of business, doing business in other countries that are not strong democracies. There's always the threat of some sort of instability in terms of leadership, and when you're dealing with countries that either like socialism or lean socialists, have some sort of dictatorship, you have to be very careful that your assets and your company just don't get absorbed by the market, by the government. And this is essentially what China has done in this situation here. Okay, so let's kind of go through the story. China enticed an American entrepreneur with the opportunity of building a cutting-edge automobile company in the world's largest car marketplace. Then used the uncertainty of COVID-19 to steal his intellectual property, the businessman says. Now, this company is owned by Steve Saleen, founder of especially high-performance sports cars, Saleen Automotive. If you've ever been to a large auto show, a sports car show or anything like that, you've seen these cars. Let me just bring a picture of one up right now. This is one of their 2019 models here. It's a phenomenal looking vehicle, okay? But he might not own it any longer. So, Stephen Saleen, it says here, and his partner, Charles Wang, a Chinese immigrant and former attorney at a New York law firm, were approached in 2019 about a joint venture with the city of Rugao, I'm probably saying that incorrectly, to manufacture automobiles. The deal offered, I thought, from my standpoint, a great opportunity to build a global company, Saleen told Fox Business. And I'm going to pause before we go through the rest of the story. That's where they get you. That's where they get American companies always. That's what all of this is about. When you see the NBA not saying anything bad about China on human rights violations and chastising NBA team executives for actually speaking out. It's because of the size of the Chinese market. Let's take a look at something real quick. I'm just going to switch the thing here. This was 2019, last year. China to become the world's largest retail market, even with a slowdown. Okay, this was put out on Forbes last year. According to eMarketer report released in January, retail sales in China will reach more than $5.6 trillion, about $100 billion more than in the United States. That's just the retail market. We're not even talking about the automobile marketplace, okay? With nearly 1.4 billion people, which is roughly four times the size of the U.S. population, the news that China will become the largest retail marketplace in the world is more or less inevitable. And they're right. With that many people, as long as you can get them jobs and some semblance of decent income, they're human beings. I mean, human beings all react the same way. Our first concern are security and safety. And once we have that secured to a certain degree, we begin to move on to other things, luxuries. And who doesn't want a better TV, a better phone, better house, better car? Everybody. It's human nature. So when you're dealing with, 1.5 billion people, that's a large marketplace. And American companies just see dollar bills. Dollar bills, y'all. That's all they see. And it blinds them to the dangers of dealing with China until it's too late. So we go back over to this story with Fox Business. And of course, it's going to refresh on me when it really didn't need to refresh on me. Let me see if I can fix this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so the agreement that Steve Saleen had with China, with the government there, was reached, called for Saleen to contribute his brand and trademarks, designs for 3 engineered vehicles, and experience, know-how, and technology in manufacturing automobiles. Those contributions were valued at about $800 million. Wang, who helped structure the deal, would serve as the company's chief executive officer. Sounds all good, right? Come in, get access to the new marketplace, provide economic growth, provide exciting cars for Chinese people to buy. What could go wrong, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong with this scenario? For their efforts, Saleen, Wang, and their partners would receive 2/3 of ownership of the newly formed company. Now, 2/3, that 66% of the company, the government owning the other 33%. So you would think if you've got 66 and they've only got 33, you have effective control of the company. And since it's your intellectual property, your expertise, that actually makes sense. However, and let's go over the deals a little more. So, as I mentioned, the Guy's government, which would own the remaining third, was responsible for providing capital of $500 million and $600 million in subsidized loans over 3 years to fund operations and build a manufacturing company. Just as a side note, this is the other thing that China is able to do that puts them, gives them a competitive edge against American and European businesses. And it's simple. They subsidize a lot of these businesses in their country. Straight money. I mean, not American-sized subsidies in which you just get a tax break. The government sends these companies money. Or if they give you a loan, it's backed up to a large degree by the Chinese government in a much different way than we do here in the U.S. What that allows them to do a lot of times is undercut costs in price against competitors because, of course, companies in the U.S. and Europe most often have to come up with most of their capital on their own. Of course, the loans that they get, if they're in the industry where they can get subsidized loans from the government, certainly are not at the same sort of favorable rates that China provides their Chinese-owned companies. So what happens is pretty simple. If your interest rate's lower and you've just got a better deal on that loan and that money that's being subsidized by the government, it's easier to have a lower price. So that's another way that they're able to gain a competitive advantage here. Okay, so where is this place? Rugaru is located on China's eastern seaboard, somewhere right here, not far from Shanghai. Okay, so as I said, sounds like a great deal. So what happens next? Everything was going according to plan. The initial product was an SUV, which was in certification, and the employee headcount for the factory was nearly swelled from 3 people to 1,000. Great growth. That's exactly what China wants, right? 1,000 new jobs, the intellectual property and expertise that backs up the product that those 1,000 jobs are used to make the product. And of course, the American company gets a lot of profits, potentially. It also had 470 state-of-the-art robots. Then COVID-19 struck. With both Saleen and Wang stuck in the U.S. as flights to China were grounded, the Ragu government seized control and nationalized the company. See, when you own 66% of something and your partner only owns 33%, or you own 80% of something and your partner only owns 20%, or you own 95% of something and your partner owns 5%, or even if you own 100% of something in a foreign country, if that government decides to nationalize, your ownership means zip, nada, nix, nothing. International law, what? What is America going to do? We're going to go to war over a company that got taken over? No. I mean, we might do that over oil. We might do that for Exxon. We're not doing that for a car company. There's just no way. This is a lesson. This is a lesson. Okay, and we're going to go through the rest of the story, but Saleen is not the only company that's having these issues. Okay, this is a regular situation that happens. Okay, on June 29th, the city sent 6 police cars with sirens blaring and vans full of private security forces to raid Saleen's manufacturing facility and offices. The forces order employees to leave and shut off the water and electricity. Shutting off the water and electricity. Isn't that something that the mayor of LA just said they were going to do for people who had their own private gatherings at their house? Anyway, I digress. Executives who were Chinese nationals were forced to resign or face consequences from the government, Saleen told Fox Business. The remaining employees were terminated. Now, this is a little bit unclear, because, when you're dealing with China, terminated could mean fired or just killed. You just never know. It is China after all. I think they mean they were just fired from the job. 2 employees, Frank Sterner, a German national who was vice president of manufacturing, and Grace Yin Yu, a Chinese national in charge of corporate affairs, were detained. While Sterner was released after 6 hours when he contacted the German embassy with a cell phone that wasn't confiscated, Yin Yu was held for a month after she refused to corroborate the local government's claims that Wang tried to embezzle money. So, this is the scam. you bring the Chinese national in, whom you have a lot more leverage over than someone from someone who's non-Chinese, and get them to agree to the story that says one of the principals was embezzling money or doing some other sort of illegal activity, thereby creating cover for what the Chinese government did. This is pretty standard in these types of governmental regimes. Let's go back here. Ragu authorities also claimed Saleen's technology was worthless and false information was given to secure a higher valuation. Without Saleen's knowledge, officials had previously filed 510 patents for the intellectual properties that he developed, 120 of which were already awarded, including his signature supercharger. Many of the filings didn't even list Saleen as the inventor. When they say forced IP, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about you bring your company into China and you have to do one or two things. Either be willing to share the IP and information in order to get access to their market, and they do this through their these types of partnerships, and then they just straight copy it, or they do something like this where they just seize the profits. Of course, they submit the patents. You don't know they're submitting the patents because, of course, they're submitting them through the Chinese government. So why would you know? It's not as if they're submitting them through the U.S. Okay. So this is a picture of the SUV that they developed. It's a pretty nice looking car, I have to say. The Ryukyu government did not comment when reached by Fox Business. Efforts to obtain comment from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, located in Beijing, were unsuccessful. Read that as ignored. And a spokesperson for the U.S. Commerce Department didn't respond to a request from Fox Business. This is probably low on Trump's radar, so they don't have a comment yet because they're probably just finding out about this. While chances are slim for a resolution on the mainland, Saleen and Wang have an avenue for arbitration in Hong Kong, which has just been taken over by the Chinese government, and essentially their autonomy is now over, so don't expect much to happen there. The irony is that Saleen's company was being taken over. The U.S. and China were putting the finishing touches on a Phase 1 trade deal for which President Trump had been pushing for since taking office. The agreement includes promises from Beijing to halt intellectual property theft, and a second phase now in limbo as tensions between the two countries mount. All right, so that's what's happening. And the reason for it is blind greed. Now look, I'm a capitalist. I love making money. I love reading about people who are making money, who create products and become successful, come from nothing, become a billionaire, become a millionaire, people who come from middle class and become millionaires, people who become millionaires, lose their money, gain the money back in another. I love stories like that. I'm going to find some more, in fact, to bring upon the Business Intercept. But when dealing with a foreign country that has a habit of doing these things, seeing dollar signs in the form of a population of $1.4 billion is a mistake, as Saleen is finding the hard way. And he's not the only one. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to do a quick search live here on the amount of IP stolen by China. Kind of give you an idea. Right here, the U.S. Trade Representative has estimated that the annual loss to China at between $225 billion and $600 billion, according to CNN. There are different ways Chinese companies reportedly obtain U.S. IP, corporate espionage, cyber attacks are too, but the easiest way is to do it the way they just did it. Now, granted, nationalizing all of that was an extreme step. But assume that coronavirus never happened. If COVID never happened, there's still 510 patents that the government has submitted that's all based on Saleen's information. Those patents are his, not the Chinese government's. They have nothing to do with it. The reason they brought him in is the reason that they bring all American companies and all European companies, because they can't develop this stuff on their own. Now, someone out there might see this video and say that's nonsense. Chinese people are they have an incredible work ethic. They're obviously smart. They come over to American universities or European universities and pretty much blow the curve for grades out of the water because they're so intelligent and work so hard. I'm not doubting any of that, but you got to understand something. Innovation is not a function of IQ. It's not a function of hard work. Innovation is a function of creativity mentally and being in a system that allows that creativity to grow in many different ways. When you're in a socialist country, when you're in a communist country, the very nature of the government and social strata in that country prevents the type of innovation that we as Americans take for granted. The iPhone would not have been invented in China. Period. Facebook would not have been invented in China. It's, how to make a car is relatively simple. But why go through the pain and expense of trying to develop your own processes if you can just buy, i.e. steal, the information from somebody else? It literally helps you leapfrog ahead. China is this big how can I put this? China is building itself right now in many ways to be a preeminent power in the world, and not just because of their population size. Okay, that's today. You don't go back too many decades when China wasn't like that at all. I mean, there was no talk about this in the 60s and 70s. When Richard Nixon made his historic trip to China and started opening relations with China, he started doing that for the same reason that Saleen and all these other American companies went over to China, because they see those people and they know it's a huge market, and for a long time we didn't have access to it. I mean, in fact, if you really want to get to the genesis of this, I would suggest when you're finished watching this video and some of the other videos on the channel, Google the Opium Wars. Okay, look at a couple of videos, because the Opium Wars weren't really about what the name implies. And it's interesting that when you listen to what led up to them, it is literally the same situation then as today. People trying to get access to the Chinese market, China not really interested. Now, China is interested because we're in the modern era, and they want to catch up, for many reasons, to Europe and America and Russia. Okay? They don't want to be left behind militarily, economically. They're not technology-wise. They're not really concerned about the social part of it because, look, to them, China overall is more important than anybody's social, any sort of rights or anything like that. But in order to leapfrog ahead as fast as they have been able to, it's been because companies have been willing to come into China and share their information as long as they get access to that market. That's blind greed, because when you give up your IP, you give up the future of your company. Now, I don't know what Saleen's going to do in this situation. His recourse is very, very limited. He can go to the State Department. Certainly, the Trump administration is very sympathetic to these type of situations. It is another example that Trump could use in a campaign speech about how China's taking advantage of us. That's all well and good, but that doesn't really help Saleen's company. What he wants, what he needs, is his IP back, and if not the company, he needs at least his $800 million worth of information and investment back. Is he likely to get it? Well, I don't particularly think so, but only time will tell. Hopefully, they can provide another example of the danger of working with China. American companies are going to have to decide a couple of different things. Either to forget about China altogether. I mean, forget about them. You know what? India has a lot of people too. Okay? Sell it to India. Russia has a lot of people. If you're going to be in China, if you have to be in China, then you're going to have to, companies are going to have to figure a way to do so without setting up these government-private partnerships, because obviously, the Chinese government cannot be trusted. That's going to do it for this particular video. If you have any comments about this subject, please put them below. Like I said, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when new videos are released.